Leviticus 25. I will open up as I did on Friday. A few years ago, as an introduction, I shared a message called The Harbinger. It spread around the country. I had a life, it took off as a life of its own. Tonight we continue in that same, in a sense, revelation or message, which is a prophetic kind of message. The second part, which is called The Harbinger 2. That is the series. In the second part, there are 6 messages. 3 so far have been shared. I shared 1 on Friday. The first one was called the Isaiah 9:10 effect. That was the first one earlier this summer. The second was called the Uprooted. On Friday night, it was the Mystery of the Shemitah Part 1. The next time I share will most likely be 9/11 itself. It falls on Friday night. And then one more after. As with the Harbinger, these were first shared here or will be shared in their fullness here. At the Messiah Conference, I shared a condensing of the Harbinger 2 messages, but here I'm going to share the full message in its entirety. Will be fuller than anything I've shared before on this, and will include things within it not shared before. If you were here on Friday, this is the second part, the conclusion of Friday, which this is the Harbinger 3rd and 4th message, but it's the Mystery of the Shemitah 1 and 2. There was too much for me to do in one teaching. So if you were here on Friday, it's important that I first set the stage of the mystery before moving on to more things that have never been shared, as far as I know, anywhere. For those of you who are not here on Friday, I can't possibly go through the detail of everything I shared on Friday, but I will give the key points of the overall mystery. And for you who were here, because there was so much to this, and I have to move fast, it'll be good for you to hear the key points again. It'll become even clearer, and as we move to things not shared, and even when I set the stage, there'll be things in it that were not shared before. So, for everyone, listen closely, seek to focus. There's a lot. If you miss anything, it's recorded. But we could go, these things in here could go for hours and days. But we're going to see some things, truly profound, amazing things that have eluded experts, world leaders, Nobel Prize winning economists. They don't know. You're going to know more because you're going to know from the Word of God. And how what is happening in America and the world behind Wall Street, from Wall Street to Capitol Hill, affecting your bank account, your job, your mortgage, your retirement. Everything goes back to a mystery hidden in the sands of the wilderness of Sinai. It's something you would think, I said on Friday, it would be in a movie, like an Indiana Jones movie, but it's real. Let's first begin by looking at the first part, Leviticus 25, verse 2. When you enter the land I am giving you, the land itself will observe a Sabbath to the Lord. For 6 years you will sow your fields, and for 6 years you will prune your vineyards, and gather in its produce. But in the 7th year, the land is to have a rest, a Sabbath in the Lord. In other words, just as every 7th day was a Sabbath day of rest, so too every 7th year was a Sabbath year of rest, and the Sabbath year of rest was called the Shemitah. Try it. Shemitah means the remission, the year of remission, or in Hebrew, letting go, the year of letting go. Now, there's a link between this, which is a blessing, a year of rest, to judgment. You see, when Judah was taken from the land in exile, they were removed to Babylon, the Babylonian captivity. God said, you will be there in captivity for 70 years. Why 70 years? It's all linked to the mystery of the Shemitah. When you see this 70-year captivity, it's all because of that, because he explains it. It says in the Bible, when you put the pieces together, 70 years, each of those years represented the years that Israel did not rest. Each year was a 7th year from the past that they didn't observe at all. See, Israel turned away from God. So they said, we're not going to rest. We're not going to leave this. We want our profit. We don't want to let go of it. So God said, okay, now you would not rest. I'm going to make you rest now. I'm going to make the land rest. So they were removed from the land. The land was fallow for 70 years. Israel the fields were not touched for 70 years. They were the Shemitah years. And so what happened is the blessing turned into a curse. It became their judgment. It was the measure of how long they would be judged. It all goes to Shemitah. So the Shemitah became a sign of judgment for a nation that rejected God. Now let's put the puzzle pieces together, which will show first the definition of the Shemitah. The Shemitah is filled with economic, far-reaching, financial, economic ramifications. Touches the financial realm, the commercial realm, the realms of labor, consumption, production. In the course of the 7th year, the nation's production decreases. Its fields and vineyards are fallow. The fruits of labor are abandoned. The buying and selling of the produce is restricted. Private property becomes the property of the nation. The fruit of every field becomes the possession of all. Credit is canceled, debt is wiped away. The nation's economic prosperity is either blessed by the Shemitah or brought into judgment. To the nation that attempts to rule God out of its existence, the 7th year brings not blessing but judgment and holds the key to its timing. Now I'm going to share some things, amazing things to America. Only one nation was given the ordinance of the 7th year, only one, that is Israel. But the ultimate thing we are concerned with here is the 7th year not as a command, but as a sign of judgment. Is it possible that behind a national global implosion, underlying its form, its timing even, is linked to the mystery of the Shemitah, the 7th year? The global economic, the collapse that we witnessed in 2008 was set off by a series of trigger events, which occurred in early September last year. By early September 2008, the mortgage market and the housing markets was reeling in a state of collapse, instability. In turn, the two corporations most responsible for backing up those markets all over most of your mortgages, they were now hanging in the balance, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. On Sunday, September 7, 2008, these two corporations on which the housing market depends collapsed as the government seized control of them in the most dramatic intervention since the Great Depression. But then an even more cataclysmic collapse was about to happen. One of the world's leading financial firms began to implode, Lehman Brothers. On Monday morning, September 15, 2008, 1 week after the first collapse came the second, this time with no safety net. The government said, we will not bail you out. Lehman Brothers filed for bankruptcy, the largest bankruptcy in the history of the nation to this day, or to that day. It would trigger a worldwide financial collapse that would affect nations, every nation of the world in some way. It caused stock markets to go crazy everywhere and caused a collapse everywhere. Was there a significance in the timing? The events which would trigger this global collapse, as we shared on Friday, all took place over the course of 1 week. That week was the 7th anniversary of another calamity, 9/11. It was the same time as we were commemorating 9/11 that Wall Street was beginning to implode. And it was not just the year or the time of year, but it was the period. It was 7 years since 9/11 on the anniversary week. Now, it says at the end of every 7 years, you will have a release or a remission of debt. In the biblical calendar, the 7th year specifically concerns the issue of credit and debt. The global collapse of 2008 not only took place at the 7-year mark of 9/11, it also involved the principle of Shemitah. In the case of Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, the government bailed them out. They were released from their debt. It was debt and release. The whole thing adds up to a Shemitah. In the case of Lehman Brothers, the government refused to bail them out. Therefore, they filed bankruptcy, which meant they were released from their debt. Shemitah. Thus, it wasn't only the timing of the 7th year, but the actual dynamic of Shemitah. In other words, the American and global economic implosion that we're still reeling from, that's affecting your life, all began by the act of Shemitah. And in fact, the government said, we will let Lehman fall. That's letting go. That's Shemitah. The Lehman Brothers bankruptcy caused collapses around the world, large fortunes wiped out overnight. This too was the dynamic of the Shemitah. As I shared on Friday, the stock market is built on debt and credit. If you invest in the stock market, you are loaning them. They are indebted to you. You're the creditor. They're the debtor. And so what happens is, if a stock market crashes, it means all that is wiped out. Is wiped out unless it comes back later, but it's wiped out for the time. So in the year of Shemitah, every creditor lets go of his debt. That's exactly what happened. And I remember, the dynamic of the Shemitah reaches its greatest intensity on the last day of it, which is the day in Hebrew, Elul 29, when every remaining debt and credit has to be wiped out in one day. That is the central day of the Shemitah, the end. At the end of September 2008, the New York Stock Exchange plunged over 700 points. In terms of point loss, it was the worst day in the history of Wall Street up to this day, the crowning day of the crisis. It was also, amazingly, the crowning day of something else. The worst one-day crash in Wall Street history took place, amazingly, on the 29th day of Elul, the crowning day of the Hebrew Shemitah. It was the mass nullification of debt, the greatest in history. It was on the day ordained by God for the wiping away of credit and debt. I want you to see it. I want you to look at there. See that right there. You see the big drop there? And you see just when it happens, you could write right on there, Shemitah, the Elul 29, because on Elul 29, that is the divider point right there where the whole thing plunges. That is it. You see, very dramatically, that is the exact day. Now, we saw last time also that this day, the crowning day of the seventh year, was filled, saturated with a prophetic sign, the sign of the number 7. This is the seventh, the end of the completion of the seventh year, the culmination of the very day that marks the letting rest, or the year of release. The Shemitah was the year of remission, letting rest, letting go, and releasing. The requirements of the Shemitah, the year, were unique. Verse 4, do not sow your field or prune your vineyards. Do not reap what grows of itself, and do not gather in the grapes of your untended vines. It will be a Sabbath for the Lord. There was, first of all, to be no working of the land, no plowing, no sowing, no pruning, no reaping, no harvesting. Letting go. The second part, though one could partake of things that grew of themselves, there was a massive letting go or abandoning much of the fruit and harvest that grew in the fields. So there was a letting go of the fruit. Third, there was strict limitations concerning buying and selling any fruit or produce. Fourth, the fruit of the land became the possession of all. For 6 years, it says now in Exodus 23, verse 10 and 11, for 6 years you will sow your land and gather in its fruits. But in the seventh year, you will let it rest and lie fallow, so that the poor may eat of it, and whatever they leave it will be for the wild animals. You are to do the same for your vineyard and olive grove. In other words, each landowner had to open up his property to anyone who wished to partake it. Vineyards, fields had to be open, gates open. The poor could partake equally with the rich. So in the seventh year, the fruit of the land, in a very real sense, belonged to everybody, to the nation. If one's property, the private, it went to the nation. And so that which might have been sold for profit in other years was now given away freely. And lastly, in the seventh year, the Israelites were to apply the remission, the Shemitah, the letting go to each other. At the end of every 7 years, it is written, you will have a release, a remission, a Shemitah. Cancellation of debts. This is the way the debts are to be canceled. Every creditor who made a loan to his neighbor will cancel it. He will not require it from his neighbor or from his brother, for it is the Lord's Shemitah, remission. Deuteronomy 15, 1 through 2. This was perhaps the most dramatic required in the seventh year, or specifically applying to each other. In the Shemitah, all debts were canceled. Everybody who made a loan had to annul it, had to let it